So today I thought I'd take a minute to talk about some common fraud inside the roofing industry. Now there's a lot of scams out there that you need to be aware of, but these are kind of the 5 most common scams that you have to look out for out there. So the first one I want to talk about is price swap. And so this is an oldie but a goodie. It is technically illegal, but there's a lot of ways that people get around it. So what happens is you're going out there, you're getting quotes from a few different contractors. It's typically standard to get 3 different quotes. And so the contractor, knowing this, intentionally underbids. So you've got a $20,000 roof, and he's going to go in there and he's going to say it's worth $16,000. And he does this because he knows that even if he's just underbidding the other contractors by a couple $1,000s, you're probably going to lean towards him. Unfortunately, it is a price-driven market. And so you call him up, you say, hey, I want to go with you. And as soon as you sign the contract, or as soon as you make him aware that, he's your choice, he goes, oh, I'm sorry, we had an error. He'll either say that his calculator, which is supposed to be automated, put in the wrong value of the roof, or because you wanted an upgraded material, it accidentally gave you the weaker material. One of the older ways that they used to pull this is they would say, well, my secretary accidentally hit the wrong number. So we actually were supposed to add in about an extra $5,000 there. But I tell you what, I'm a good guy. Normally this roof would cost you $22,000. I know I bid you $16,000. I'm willing to, split the loss there and call it $19,000. And the reality is that he could have done it for $18,000. Now he just got you for an extra $1,000. And you're still going with him because you're already on the phone with him, you realize. Or he'll say, well, I'll tell you what, if we can go back to that original price, $22,000, I'll give you this new upgraded material. It's going to be impact resistant. And the reality is that he is going to increase that price. So now you're paying $22,000. You're not really getting an upgraded material. Even if you are, that upgrade is worth a few $100. And that actually is very similar to the next scam I'm going to tell you about. But the way that the price swap works is they advertise a price to you, and then they change it the moment they realize that you actually want the product, or that you want their service. This is insanely common. It is technically illegal in the United States. However, reporting it is a pain. I'll admit, I've reported this myself before, and the process is not as easy as it should be, nor as quick as it should be, and the punishment for them doing it is usually, at most, they get investigated. Even if they're found guilty of it, the fines usually aren't what they make in profit. But the fact of the matter is that it is technically illegal. In some states, they can actually get arrested for it, have their license permanently revoked. And it is something worth reporting when it happens to you, because yes, accidents do happen, and some contractors can't afford to just, let that slide and honor the original price. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't. That just means that they can't afford it. The second most common one is the material swap, of course. And so you pay for a high quality impact resistant material, and come to find out, you start looking at the labels, well, they gave you the downgraded material. It's as simple as that. Or another super common thing, especially with commercial roofing, is they will convince you to buy 60 mil and 80 mil materials when it comes to your PVC, TPO, EPDM, and they will go back out with 50 mil or 40 mil. I saw one guy once who went out with 30 mil RV material. And they just, install the roof, and you'll never know the difference, because even if you go up there with the gauge, they're not exactly accurate. And unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers will claim 50 mil and then produce a 45 mil membrane and market it as 50 mil. It's insanely common, and as much as we want to call it fraud, there's usually some sort of disclaimer like, oh, when the extrusion machine is set for 50 mil, if you calculate the width of the bottom plus the top plus the scrim, without realizing that some of that top bleeds through the scrim and actually reduces the total thickness. There's a lot of ways that the manufacturers get away with it. I'm not worried about the manufacturer level. I'm worried about the contractor level. And suppliers do this a lot too. So I can't always say that's the contractor's fault, because suppliers will intentionally swap your material all the time for cheaper variants of it. So they'll usually keep it within the same brand, but they will send out a cheaper variant of a similar color all the time. Back when I was regularly installing, I would say that probably 20% of my orders came in wrong. A lot of times if I was ordering 24 gauge steel, I would get 26 or 28 sent out to me. Or another personal favorite for you metal guys, when you're ordering G120, which is a much thicker, higher quality finish for your metal, a lot of times they'll send you G60. And you should check. You should take a sample piece out of every few bundles every single time. The amount of fraud in the metal portion of the roofing industry by suppliers is insane. The next one I want to talk about, kind of the next most common one, is deposit theft. Now, in a lot of states, it's illegal to even collect a deposit ahead of time. Some states make it so that you can only collect a deposit equal to the amount of materials after you've delivered those materials. And some states have rules where there's a maximum deposit size, like $1,000, $2,000, or 1% of the roof. And what you see a lot of is, especially when it comes to insurance claims, where there's that upfront payout, and then you might have depreciation on the back end, but either way, you've got thousands of dollars up front. They'll collect that as a deposit, and then as soon as they get that, they will run. And if they know the depreciation policy, in some cases what they'll do, some insurance companies, once you show that you're actively installing the roof, they might release that depreciation. And so what some contractors, really, let's be honest here, these are con men, these aren't actual contractors. What they'll do is they'll start tearing off the roof and at least lay up felt. And once they've shown substantially, hey, we've begun this project, the depreciation gets released, they get that and they bolt. They just no longer exist anymore. Their phone number's changed, or their phone number was just spoofed to begin with. And next thing you know, you've got a halfway torn off roof. Either way, deposit theft is insanely common. It's probably the most common form of contractor fraud there is to collect a deposit on the roof and then just never show up and finish it. And you actually see this out of local contractors too. People that have a fixed office, their phone number does exist, their email is still valid. These are licensed people that do it, and they know that the repercussions are so small, and the odds of them actually getting jailed for it are almost nil. Usually the worst punishment you get is your license gets restricted for, 5 years, which whoop-de-doo, who needs a license to operate, because most people, if they're willing to pull that level of fraud, they're not going to care about a license. And even if they do, well, the license restriction is on the individual. So your brother, your sister, your mother, your cousin, your aunt, your wife, your son, your underage son. You just put the permit in a new name, or put the license in a new name. You get them to fill out a form for you, you pay them $100, and you're out pulling thousands upon thousands of dollars in scam. Whoop-de-doo. There's no punishment. Another, and how to avoid this one. So as far as deposit theft goes, ideally you shouldn't have to pay a deposit, but a lot of smaller contractors can't afford not to charge a deposit. I would definitely check with your state legislature before you start hiring contractors whether or not a deposit is even legal. State of Colorado is a perfect example. If you're doing residential work in the state of Colorado, there are very strict laws about your deposit and what your contract must say. So don't get pulled into that scam. But it's really hard to know which contractors you can trust, because it still happens with people that have been around for decades. Sometimes it's unintentional. Sometimes they collect a deposit and just forget about your job, so maybe give them a reminder. But a lot of times what it boils down to is, as soon as they collect your deposit, you should have a start date in mind by then, or at least they should have a range for you. And if they miss that range, if they start blocking your calls, go to the news. Every news station loves reporting on contractor fraud like this. It doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. It doesn't matter what news station. I have never seen a local news station that wasn't straight up giddy to report these. It's their favorite thing. And so that's really the best thing you can do, because once the news is involved, then usually the county, whatever local jurisdiction handles permitting, actually gets involved. I have actually seen probably the most efficient punish, and this is stupid, but probably the most efficient punishment I've ever seen for this scam was, we had a county here that they caught a roofer doing it. The local news picked it up, and rather than fining him or restricting his license, they basically put a mass hold on all of his active permits that were still open, put a hold on his license, and told them that if they didn't catch up on all the people that they'd collected a deposit on, that they were going to try them for fraud. And again, it would go nowhere, and the punishment would probably be a slap on the wrist. But that's a permanent mark on their name. That's a criminal background for them. And because of the way they were running it on fraud on all these permits. Well, each one of them carried up to about a 90-day sentence, which, again, 90 days. But the way they were running it, they were going to hit him for every one of his jobs. And would it go anywhere? No. Would he maybe get 90 days in jail? Yes. But they were forcing him to do the work, finally. And that's been the most efficient way, because contractors aren't going to hear that, oh, shoot, I may go to jail for 90 days. They're going to see that, and they're going to think, oh, shoot, I might be jailed for, 40 active jobs that I haven't closed out yet. And even though it won't go anywhere, it's the fear. It's the intentional fear that the county brought into their hearts. And that fear was the only thing that got them to actually do the right thing. Wasn't the news channel, but the county wouldn't have even touched on it. The county had already been made aware of it and had chosen to opt out of doing their jobs until the news picked it up. And so that's why I always recommend going to the news if you're positive that they have taken your deposit and basically stolen it. Now, next up, some weird stuff that goes on in this neighborhood. I'm pretty sure I just saw somebody on meth walking a cat, which, yeah, it's a very interesting neighborhood out here today. And so next up is the liability waiver, and this is especially common with your door knockers. Personally, I have a policy. If somebody knocked on my door, I blacklist them. I don't ever go with that contractor. Not unless I have a very good reason, a lot of recommendations from a lot of people I trust. Even if it's just one or two people, absolutely not. I do not believe in door knockers at all. I understand sometimes that's how you have to build up business when you're a new company. Most of the worst con men I've ever met have all been door knockers. And nearly every one of the major scams are done by door knockers. And so next up is the liability waiver. Now, there's a lot of different ways that they do this. Some call it a liability waiver. Some call it an inspection fee. Some call it a right to work. Some call it an intent form. Some call it a form so that they can do insurance negotiations for you. And so what they do is, you recently had a storm. They come up to your house. They knock on your door. Maybe you called them. But most of the time they knocked on your door out of the blue. And they say, hey, we know there's been recent weather in your area. We're working on one of your neighbor's houses right now. We wanted to see if maybe you wanted us to look at your roof, let you know, hey, do you need to call the insurance company, get this done? And what they'll do is they'll then hand you a form that says, hey, this is just a quick waiver. And most of the time, the oldest version of this scam was that, hey, this is just a quick liability waiver that says that if we fall, we won't hold you liable for anything. And so what it really is, on the back side of that, is it'll say something along the lines of, you agree to let them do any insurance work, and if they recommend that you do insurance claims, you have to do it. And if you choose not to do it, or if you file that insurance claim and go with a different contractor, you owe them a certain amount of money. It may be a fixed rate, it may be a percentage of the claim, it may be a percentage of the perceived cost of the roof. And so you just thought you were getting a free inspection, and now, even if there's no damage on the roof, they're going to turn around and say you need to file a claim, and even if the claim gets denied, they're going to get a payout. And This has been made very illegal in multiple places. So what contractors have done to kind of rework that is now they're saying, well, so what this is that this just gives us permission to talk to your insurance company, or this just gives us permission to be on the roof. And on the back side of it, there's this little thing that says, hey, you owe us $1,000, but if you go with our recommended repair or go with our recommended replacement, then we refund that $1,000 or we take it off the total of the insurance claim. And so again, either way, you're obligated for $1,000. Well, that was an experience. Sorry about the gap there. One of the neighbors came up and wanted to threaten to have me arrested for parking on the public road. Yeah, he was screaming all kinds of stuff about how this is a private road and that's his neighbor's driveway. He knows I'm not allowed to be here and I need to get my scummy, a lot of swear words, out of here. He's calling the cops. It's a public road. It's a public road. It's not only a public road, but the neighbor invited me to look at his house to try to help out with the situation that's going on. And yeah, boy, you know, I thought Meth Cat was going to be the fun part of my day, but so back on subject. Trying to remember which one we were on. So we had just talked about the fake liability waivers, and a lot of times these contracts, they're just, you know, little hidden contracts to get you to sign up in advance, and they'll tell you hundreds of different ways. Like I said, sometimes it's about an insurance waiver, sometimes it's about communications. There's a ton of reasons, but 9 times out of 10 it all boils down to you are now forced to go with them and do what they recommend, or they fine you, or they charge you. And it's an age-old scam. And especially, we actually had a local contractor that I used to work with. Well, work with is a strong word. A local contractor who was regularly on the same buildings as me. The reason because is basically I was working with a lot of insurance companies at the time as a third party. And what you would regularly get with this guy is he would send out all these salesmen, and every single one of them would have those liability waivers, and they had a $1,800 assessment fee. And they would make you call in every job for insurance. A lot of times they would have these salesmen, they wouldn't even get on the roof. They would claim it was hail damage or wind damage, depending on what storm was most recent, and tell them they have to file a claim. If they didn't file a claim, they owed them $1,800. And they racked up all kinds of money. That's how they paid for their little door-to-door scheme. So the next type of scam that we regularly see, and the next type of fraud, is it goes back to the whole you get multiple bidders on your projects. And so you go with person A, and person C calls you up and says, well, I just wanted to check to see if you still need that roof done. And they find out, oh, well, you went with somebody else. And so they say, well, do you happen to know who it was that you went with? I just want to make sure that, you know, it's a good local contractor. I want to make sure you're taken care of. Or a whole scheme about how, well, you know, I know there's been a lot of scammers. I just want to make sure you're taken care of. They always come out like they're coming to help you. And regardless of who you say, you could say any company, you could say the largest, most reliable company in the world. And they'll say, well, I'm not too familiar with that guy, or I've had bad run-ins with that person. I tell you what, you know, just as a show of good faith, I just want to offer, hey, how about once they're finished up, we come by, we do a free inspection for you. And they come out, they start damaging the roof. Now, I'm not saying that everyone that does this is a scammer, but I'm saying 99.9% of the time, if they offer a free inspection after another roofer does the roof, they're going out there and they're going to intentionally damage it. And so they do this to make the other contractor look bad. They do it so that you don't use them in the future. You're going to badmouth them on social media. And then suddenly it also makes them look good, so you might give the contractor C a popular review. You might be willing to hire them to do the repairs, to fix it. So there was actually a contractor years ago up in Golden, Colorado. And I'll never forget what happened. So he was one of the biggest contractors around. and he installed a lot of flat roofs, and he would bid up against a lot of people, and he would offer these free inspections, and he'd show up in his little inspection backpack, say, hey, I'm just going to give it a look, make sure you don't have any leaks. And he'd get up on the roof, and once he was on the roof and he was hidden by the parapet walls, he would take off his boots and he would put on his golf cleats. Now, for those of you that haven't dealt with a lot of flat roofs, the tiniest pinhole can cause a leak that's almost impossible to find. So when you got a guy going around with his golf cleats, putting a bunch of little steps everywhere, especially on a tar and gravel or modified bitumen roof, you now have leaks that the only way you're ever going to find, even with any form of, infrared, any form of moisture meters, the only way you're going to find these is by guess and check. By just patching a whole area, just trying to randomly guess where it's coming at. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of damages. He got caught one day on camera doing it. Now, this guy had been in business for over 30 years by the time he was caught. Nobody knows how long he was doing it. I did have a chance to interview one of his previous employees, and we do know that he was doing it for at least about 12 years. And I just blows my mind, the amount of scammers out there. And I'm not saying the roofing industry is particularly bad. There are scams in every industry. The roofing industry just happens to be one of the less regulated ones, in part because a lot of local building officials are scared to get on a roof, in part because most people don't see the roof. I mean, even if you've got a house with a nice slope that you can see the roof from the ground, you're not going to see the minor mistakes or the little scams very much. Not like you would with, say, siding. And so the last scam I want to talk about today is a type of identity theft, in my opinion. And it's these shell companies most of the time. So sometimes you get these salesmen that come out. They might have a logo on their shirt. They might not. But they have these contracts in other contractors' names. They steal their logo. They steal their name. Sometimes they'll post fake listings on Google Maps. They'll set up a fake website. And so I'm going to give an example of a company that no longer exists. And it was called Colorado Commercial Roofing. Now, this company's gone. This company was closed down in 2018. That's why I feel comfortable talking about them. Normally, I do the very best I can to ever avoid communicating about a company. I don't even like usually showing my company logos in the background. I do my best to avoid, because this channel is meant for information. It's not meant to advertise. And so Colorado Commercial Roofing was a local flat roofing contractor. They did a little shingles, but they mostly did flat roofing from what they said. And what happened is we had another local contractor who went all over Google and set up Colorado Commercial Roofing and Construction, Colorado Commercial Roofing LLC, and he set up all these fake ones on Google. They always would link to an office building in the middle of town and a random suite number that didn't exist. One of the locations was up on the north end of town, and it was supposedly a suite of one of those strip malls. You know, you got a King Soopers on one side, you got a TJ Maxx on the other, and claiming that they were in one of those units. And just a bunch of little fake shell locations all over town, including one that was about 2 blocks away from the actual Colorado Commercial Roofing. And they would scam the name, they would take the logo, they'd upload fake testimonials, and they all had these phone numbers. And well, you can, on your smartphone, you can get applications where you can own 2, 3, 4 different phone numbers, and whenever somebody calls, it shows what number they're calling. And so all you know, or you have your main company, let's call it something totally random. In fact, you know what, that's a good name right there. We'll call it Total. And so Total knows that if it's their main phone number calling, they go, oh, hey, this is Total Roofing and Construction. And so they sell under that name. But then they see the other number coming and they go, oh, hey, this is Colorado Commercial Roofing. And so when they send their guys out, they send them out either in shirts with no logos. They'll send them out with trucks, but the trucks have magnets so that they can swap them out. And they spoofed this other company's name and would do absolutely shoddy work so that, A, they spoof one of the largest and well-rated local companies. B, if anything goes wrong, nobody can come after them because they think it was the original. And C, kind of a really messed up C, they weren't filing permits. And how this company was originally caught, how one of the spoofs was originally shut down, and how we found out who was actually responsible, because I was kind of a third-party outsourced for this, was because in the background of one of their testimonials, they put their real office. And in that background was a Pink Panther. Well, Pink Panther is a very well-known brand of shingles. Well, they do other things, but mostly shingles. And Colorado Commercial Roofing did not ever work with them, absolutely despised them, made that clear on even their blog. They even did a blog post about how god-awful that manufacturer was, in their opinion. And so, eventually, it makes it to the contractor review board. They're trying to press charges. Don't have enough proof. Don't have proof that it actually caused harm or that it was illegal. Cops won't do anything about it. So the choice is lawsuit or try to get the local building department involved. So we got the local building department involved. And we started telling them, here's a problem with that identity theft. Now you're thinking, oh man, this person should serve jail time. Police don't care. Sad fact about it, they don't care about roofing. So contractor review board basically goes out, strips them of their license, strips the individual who held the license, and places a 2-year ban on him. That was the punishment. A 2-year ban. A 2-year ban on him, not his wife. That company never even slowed down. Now, they took down all their fake listings. Well, they more likely changed the names. But within a few months of that, there was no more of these spoofs of Colorado Commercial Roofing. And this all happened back in 2009, 2010. And the guy's still out there to this day. In fact, not even a month ago, he ended up pulling up to a roof that I was consulting on, and he was the contractor that had won the bid. And as soon as I saw him, I had to, make my little disclaimer. Hey, this guy has a history of fraud. In fact, he's actually been charged with fraud in a different case. And he's still out there. He's had his license revoked multiple times, and it just gets picked up by another person, and he just waits a few years. There's no punishment for it. And so those are the 5 most common types of fraud. I wanted to give a little detail there, give a little background on how I've seen some of these in person, just because these are so incredibly common, and the only way that we can ever get them to stop is if we raise awareness of them.